gross habits of rich people in the past. Welcome, lucky soul, to your new life of wealth and privilege. You've just awakened in the body of one of history's most pampered, powerful, and, as you'll soon discover, putrid elites. While your newfound status grants you limitless power and luxury, it also comes with some rather distinctive customs. So settle in as I guide you through your daily routine as one of history's wealthiest and most disgusting human beings. Morning routine. Arise, your filthiness. Good morning, your excellency. The sun has risen, and so must you, though your breath could certainly kill a small animal at 20 paces. Don't worry, that's perfectly normal for someone of your stature. As a wealthy Roman in the 1st century AD, your morning begins with your slave bringing your morning gargler, delightful concoction of Portuguese urine. Yes, you heard that correctly. The ammonia in urine was thought to disinfect mouths and whiten teeth, making it a popular mouthwash ingredient until the 18th century. Emperor Nero was so fond of this practice that he even placed a tax on the urine trade. The Portuguese variety was particularly prized. Congratulations! Your breath now smells of both last night's garum-soaked feast and stale urine. What luxury! The ammonia in urine does have antibacterial properties and could help remove stains from teeth, though at what cost to your social life remains debatable. But wait, perhaps you're not a Roman but a wealthy Victorian. In that case, your morning routine looks slightly different. Your lady's maid is busy preparing your facial treatment, a delightful mixture containing arsenic. You'll consume these arsenic wafers to achieve that coveted, pallid, consumptive look. That's all the rage. Nothing says I'm wealthy enough to never work outdoors like skin that resembles a fresh corpse. In Victorian England, having a ghostly pallor was the height of fashion. It signaled your high social status and wealth. You never had to toil in the sun like common laborers. This fashion was so extreme that many women consumed arsenic wafers to achieve that deathly look, believing the poison would give them great energy, sparkling eyes, and wonderful complexions. Dr. James P. Campbell's safe arsenic complexion wafers were particularly popular, despite the fact that chronic arsenic poisoning caused hair loss, skin discoloration, and eventually death. But surely this is dangerous. You ask your lady's maid, who merely laughs. My lady, it says safe right on the package. She replies, offering you a small wafer on a silver tray. And besides, the Countess of Coventry used these faithfully her entire life. What your maid fails to mention is that Maria Coventry, the countess she speaks of, died at age 27, with the public referring to her demise as death by vanity. Perhaps you're from an even earlier era. If you find yourself in ancient Egypt as a noble, your morning breath freshener might consist of natron and natural salt mixed with mint. Not too terrible, but your morning face wash would likely include crocodile dung as a key ingredient. Egyptian nobility believed it prevented wrinkles and bestowed a youthful glow. The ammonia compounds in the dung did exfoliate the skin, but the obvious hygiene issues apparently weren't a concern. Your Excellency, shall I apply the special crocodile treatment today? Your servant might ask with a straight face, holding a pot of what is unmistakably animal excrement. Yes, of course, you'd reply. I'm meeting with the Pharaoh's council, and must look my most radiant. Getting dressed, the art of concealing filth. Now, it's time to get dressed, a process that will take hours and require multiple servants, regardless of which historical period you've woken up in. If you're Elizabethan royalty, your morning toilette includes applying a thick layer of Venetian ceruse to your farsa, cosmetic paste made from white lead and vinegar. Queen Elizabeth I herself used this to cover her smallpox scars, achieving that fashionable alabaster complexion while slowly poisoning herself. The mixture smoothed her complexion day to day, but over time caused skin discoloration, hair loss, and rotted teeth. Her death may have been caused by chronic lead poisoning combined with the use of other dangerous chemicals present in her cosmetics, such as mercury and arsenic. Your Majesty looks positively ghostly today, your handmaiden says with approval. Shall we add a touch of belladonna to the eyes to make them sparkle? Ah, yes. Nothing says royal beauty like dilating your pupils with deadly nightshade extract. The belladonna drops will make your eyes glassy and enlarged, an effect considered highly attractive despite the blurred vision, increased heart rate, and potential blindness it caused. Now that your face is properly poisoned, it's time for your wigger, towering creation that hasn't been cleaned in months and serves as a delightful habitat for lice and other tiny creatures. The aristocratic French and English of the 18th century would powder these monstrosities with flour or starch, mixed with sweet-smelling pomades made from animal fat. The pomades would often go rancid in the heat, creating a distinctive smell that announced your arrival before you entered a room. Your Majesty, shall we check for lice today? Asks your wig attendant. Nonsense, you reply. They are my pets. Besides, everyone at court has them. Indeed, the wealthy often kept special lice-picking tools made of silver or gold. Some nobles even kept pet fleas in tiny golden cages attached to necklaces. In the Victorian era, these were sometimes called pulicide impectory fleas. The heart-and ladies would feed them by placing the cage against their skin, allowing their tiny pets to feed on their blood. Your clothing itself presents another fascinating paradox of historical wealth. As a noble in Tudor England, your outer garments might never be washed during your lifetime. The elaborate fabrics, often interwoven with gold and silver thread, adorned with pearls and jewels, simply couldn't withstand regular cleaning. Instead, your servants would spot clean visible stains and fumigate the garments with strong herbs and spices to mask the increasingly powerful odor of body oils, sweat, and environmental dirt. Your Grace, the Spanish ambassador, complimented your doublet yesterday. Your valet might inform you, brushing a visible food stain that's been there since your coronation 15 years ago. Excellent. It's aging like fine wine, you'd reply, ignoring the fact that your clothing could probably stand up on its own by now, supported by layers of accumulated grime. Meanwhile, your undergarments if you were progressive enough to where them might be changed and washed more frequently. The wealthy in the Renaissance and beyond believed that clean linen garments worn against the skin would draw out impurities from the body, making actual bathing unnecessary. This clean linen regimen was particularly popular among the French aristocracy. Louis XIV was known to change his shirt several times a day, but rarely, if ever, fully immersed himself in water. The smell of your unwashed body would be masked by copious amounts of perfume. Nobles would douse themselves in scents made from civet anal gland secretions of the civet cat, ambergris, a solid waxy substance produced in the digestive system of sperm whales, and musk obtained from the gland of a male musk deer. These animal-derived scents were incredibly expensive, and the stronger the better. Combined with the natural body odor underneath, the result was less pleasantly fragrant and more assaulting to the senses. Perhaps a touch more civet, your Highness, asks your perfumer, already opening another vial. Absolutely, you reply. I want the Duke of Northumberland to smell me before he sees me. The royal bathroom experience, public displays of excretion. Now it's time for your morning constitutional. If you're Louis XIV of France, this isn't a private affair, it's a grand audience. The Sun King himself gave audience while seated upon his close stool, a decorative chair with a chamber pot hidden inside, discussing affairs of state while attending to affairs of a more personal nature at the Palace of Versailles. Despite its grandeur and opulence, the sanitary situation was a nightmare. Chamber pots were used for bodily functions, but waste was often disposed of haphazardly. Reports from the French court describe unbearable stenches and masses of excrement on staircases and behind doors. Louis XIV finally ordered servants to clean up the waste weekly, not daily, weekly, which was considered a significant improvement. "Magnificent, Your Majesty, what excellent form," exclaims a courtier, referring to your bowel movement. "Yes, quite the royal performance," agrees another. Hoping to gain favor, the public nature of royal bodily functions extended beyond Louis XIV. Henry VIII of England employed a groom of the stool, perhaps the most intimate royal servant, whose job was to assist the king with his toileting needs. Far from being a demeaning position, this role was highly coveted and usually held by noblemen who used their private access to the king to gain political influence. These men would literally help the king clean himself after defecation using a cloth known as a tool. "Your Majesty, shall I prepare the cloth?" asks your groom of the stool, a high-ranking nobleman whose political career depends on how well he wipes your royal posterior. Indeed, Lord Hamilton. "And while you're at it, what news from Parliament today?" You reply, conducting statecraft, in perhaps the most vulnerable position imaginable. Meanwhile, if you're an Elizabethan noble, you might have access to a garderobe, essentially a hole that drops your waist down the castle wall. These primitive toilets often emptied into moats or courtyards below, creating a stench that permeated the entire castle. The term garderobe actually meant wardrobe as well, because people would hang their clothes in these smelly spaces, believing the ammonia from urine would kill fleas and lice. It didn't. The more elaborate castles might feature garderobes built into the thickness of the walls, with stone or wooden seats positioned over a shaft that dropped waste directly outside. In winter, these unheated spaces created uncomfortable drafts, to put it mildly, as cold air rushed up from below. More disturbingly, there are historical accounts of assassinations carried out by hiding in the shaft beneath a garderobe and attacking the vulnerable noble from below. "Your Grace, shall I prepare your bath?" a servant asks. "Ah, bathing. About that, bathing. An occasional horror. If you're a medieval lord or lady, you likely bathe infrequently, perhaps several times a year at most." Queen Isabella of Spain reportedly bragged that she had only bathed twice in her entire life. Queen Elizabeth I supposedly bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not, which was considered excessive by some. When you do bathe, it's an elaborate production involving multiple servants dragging in a wooden tub, filling it with water heated over fires, and lining it with clean linen to prevent splinters in your royal backside. Herbs and oils might be added, not just for pleasant scents, but because they were thought to protect you from disease by closing your pores against my... "We've added rose oil, Your Highness," explains your attendant. "It will close your pores against ill humors." What your attendant doesn't mention is that you'll be sharing this bathwater with your entire family in descending order of rank. Of course, by the time the servants get their turn, they're essentially bathing in human soup. If you're Louis XIV, you might avoid bathing altogether, having been advised by your physicians that water could spread disease by opening the pores. and allowing bad air to enter the body. The Sun King reportedly bathed only 3 times in his entire life, and only when prescribed by doctors for headaches it didn't help, so he never tried it again. Instead of bathing, you'd change your linen shirt frequently, believing that the linen would draw impurities from your skin. Your attendants would also rub you down with perfumed cloths and douse you in heavy fragrances to mask your royal stench. "More orange blossom, sire?" asks your perfumer as he practically drenches you. "Yes." "And add some civet too," you command, requesting an expensive scent derived from the anal glands of civet cats. Bathing practices varied widely throughout history and geography. Ancient Romans, for instance, had elaborate bathing rituals in their public baths. However, these weren't as hygienic as you might imagine. Without soap as we know it today, Romans would cover themselves in oil, then scrape it off with a curved metal tool called a strigule, taking dirt and dead skin with it. The scraped off oil and skin cells would drop to the floor of the bathhouse, creating a slippery film that, according to contemporary accounts, provided an excellent breeding ground for foot fungus and other infections. If you were wealthy enough, you might have private baths in your Roman villa, but the cleaning method remained the same: oil and scraping, not soap and water. And while the flowing water systems in Roman baths were technologically impressive, the water wasn't changed as frequently as modern hygiene would demand. This meant that by the end of a busy day, you might be bathing in water that had already serviced dozens of other sweaty, oily bodies. "Would you prefer the gold strigil today, Dominus?" asks your bath slave, holding up several metal scrapers for your selection. "Yes, and be gentle around the shoulders. That new bath attendant yesterday nearly drew blood," you complain, pretending not to notice that the floor of your private bath is already slick with oil from previous bathers. In Medieval and Renaissance Europe, the wealthy might occasionally visit public bathhouses, but these eventually gained reputations as places of ill repute where more than just bathing occurred. By the 16th century, many bathhouses were closed due to concerns about spreading disease, particularly syphilis, leading to an even greater decline in bathing frequency among all classes. By the 18th century, most Europeans of all classes rarely immersed their full bodies in water. Instead, they practiced spot cleaning, washing hands, face, and occasionally underarms and genitals. The wealthy would have servants assist with this process, using porcelain basins and pitchers, fine linen, towels, and perfumed water. "Your lordship, I've prepared rose water for your hands and face," announces your valet, presenting a silver basin filled with scented water that, while pleasant smelling, will do little to address your overall bodily aroma. "Excellent, and have my red velvet doublet prepared, the one I wore to the ambassador's dinner last month." "It's high time it saw the light of day again," you reply, ignoring the fact that the garment hasn't been cleaned since it was made 3 years ago. The Victorian era finally saw a return to more regular bathing among the wealthy, though even then, full immersion baths were typically taken weekly, not daily. Hot water plumbing became a luxury for the elite, allowing for more convenient bathing without the parade of servants carrying buckets. However, many doctors of the period still warned against excessive bathing, believing it weakened the constitution and made one susceptible to illness, a particularly disturbing aspect of Victorian bathing was the practice of taking the waters at spa towns like Bath or Harrogate in England. Wealthy invalids would soak in or even drink from mineral springs that had been used by countless other sick people, believing in the curative properties of these waters, despite or sometimes because of their sulphurous smell and unpleasant taste. The doctor recommends 3 hours in the bath daily, your ladyship, and at least 4 glasses of the mineral water, explains your lady's maid, trying not to wrinkle her nose at the rotten egg smell permeating the spa. If it's fashionable, it must be beneficial, you reply stoically, wondering if the skin rash you've developed is a sign of healing or something more sinister. Congratulations, you're rich enough to have 10 servants and no soap. The everyday hygiene of the wealthy throughout history represents perhaps the most striking paradox of pre-modern life. That access to vast resources often led not to cleanliness, but to more elaborate forms of filth. The poor might bathe in rivers when weather permitted. The rich might not bathe at all, but instead layer themselves with toxic cosmetics, perfumes derived from animal glands, and clothing so valuable it could never be properly cleaned. Your wealth has purchased you many things: power, prestige, luxury, but the concept of clean, as we understand it today, was beyond the reach of even the mightiest emperor or the wealthiest queen. You may rule nations, but you cannot escape the lice in your wig, the stench under your perfume, or the slow poisoning from your beauty treatments. As the morning comes to an end, and you prepare for the day's activities, you've completed only a portion of your daily routine as a historical elite. You've awakened, applied your toxic cosmetics, dressed in your unwashed finery, attended to your bodily functions in ways that range from public performance to architectural hazard, and avoided bathing as if water were more dangerous than the arsenic you willingly consume. And you haven't even had lunch yet. Your Excellency, the banquet awaits, announces your chamberlain, bowing deeply. Splendid, you reply, adjusting your wig and ignoring the small creature that just scurried across your peripheral vision. I'm absolutely famished. Dining, a feast for flies. Mealtime in your noble household is an elaborate affair showcasing your wealth, power, and complete disregard for basic hygiene. If you're a medieval or Renaissance noble, your dinner is served in a great hall where you sit at an elevated table on a platform, allowing everyone to see what you're eating. Your distinguished guests sit beside you, while the rest of the household sits at tables running down either side of the hall in order of their importance. As you eat, you toss bones, gristle, and scraps directly onto the floor, which has been covered with Russia's straw-like plants spread across the stone floor. These rushes are supposed to be changed regularly, but most hosts, like yourself, don't bother. Mixed into the plants is a delightful patina of food scraps, vomit, spit, and dog urine. Human urine might be scattered here and there as well. You prefer guests to relieve themselves outside the hall. It's not a big deal to use a dark corner when necessary. The smell is masked by fresh herbs strewn among the rushes, and on particularly pungent days you might carry a pomander perforated ball filled with aromatic substances to hold to your nose. More wine, my lord, asks your cupbearer as you wipe your greasy hands on your elaborate velvet sleeves. If you're an ancient Roman of wealth and status, your dining habits are equally revolting, though with a Mediterranean flair. Your favorite condiment is sauce made from layering fish guts, blood, and salt in large vats and leaving them to ferment for months under the hot sun. The resulting sauce has an overpowering aroma that modern archaeologists have compared to the worst kind of fish sauce imaginable, but multiplied by 10. You recline on a couch while eating, occasionally vomiting to make room for more food. Some Romans even had a special room for this purpose, the vomitorium, though this term has been misinterpreted in modern times. Excellent garum, exclaims your guest. Is it the expensive variety from Spain? Only the best, you proudly proclaim, dabbing at your mouth with the corner of your toga. Food leftovers and bones are tossed onto the floor by you and your guests. In fact, Romans liked to decorate their banquet hall floors with mosaics depicting fish and food scraps scattered about a trompe-l'oeil technique that camouflaged the actual food waste strewn across the floor. Your table manners, regardless of historical period, would horrify modern dinner guests. As a medieval noble, you might share a trencher, a stale bread plate, with another diner, dipping your greasy fingers into the same food. Forks were rare or non-existent in many periods, so fingers were the primary eating utensils. While you might have a personal knife to cut meat and transfer it to your mouth, spoons were often shared among several diners. "The roast peacock is exceptional, Your Grace," comments your dining companion, reaching across you to grab a morsel with his unwashed fingers. "Indeed," you reply, taking a swig from a goblet that will be passed around the table for others to drink from as well. The medieval and Renaissance elite also had a penchant for elaborate subtleties. Decorative food displays, often made from sugar, designed to showcase the host's wealth and creativity. These might depict castles, mythological scenes, or heraldic emblems. While visually impressive, these sugar sculptures would sit out for hours or days, collecting dust, insects, and other airborne contaminants before being consumed for a truly grand feast. You might serve a cockentrissa, mythical beast created by sewing the front half of a rooster to the back half of a piglet, then roasting and serving the chimeric creation as a centerpiece. Other spectacular dishes included peacocks, redressed in their feathers after cooking, or pies with live birds that would fly out when the crust was cut open. These theatrical presentations took precedence over food safety or taste. The actual food at your banquet would be heavily spice-not for flavor, but to mask the taste of meat that was often on the verge of spoiling. Refrigeration didn't exist, and preservation techniques were limited, so wealthy diners compensated with imported spices that cost a fortune. The more pungent your food, the more obvious your wealth. The swan, stuffed with 24 smaller birds, is ready, Your Majesty, announces your master cook, presenting a monstrosity of nested poultry that has been sitting at ambient temperature for hours during its elaborate preparation. Magnificent, and the live eels in pastry, you inquire, referring to another showstopper, where live eels were placed inside a pie just before serving, creating a dramatic movement when the crust was cut. Ready and wriggling, sire. If you're a wealthy Tudor, your diet would be dangerously meat-heavy, with fresh fruits and vegetables considered suitable mainly for peasants. This protein-rich, fiber-poor diet led to chronic constipation among the nobility, a condition so common that Henry VIII had his own personal close stool, early toilet that travelled with him everywhere. The king's chronic constipation and subsequent hemorrhoids reportedly contributed significantly to his famously foul temper. Victorian dining, while more refined in appearance, had its own health hazards. Food adulteration was rampant in the 19th century, with manufacturers adding chalk to bread, sawdust to sugar, and poisonous chemicals for coloring. Even the wealthy weren't immune to these dangerous additives, though they might have more reliably sourced food than the lower classes. Your Victorian dinner party would feature multiple elaborate courses served by an army of servants. The obsession with proper etiquette created a dizzying array of specialized utensils: fish forks, asparagus servers, grape scissors, that made dining a performance of social status rather than a means of nourishment. Meanwhile, the kitchen staff handled your food with the same hands they used to empty chamber pots, with no concept of germ theory to suggest they should wash in between these activities. Clear soup with gold leaf, followed by poached salmon in aspic, intones your butler, as footmen in white gloves place elaborate, bacteria-laden creations before you and your guests. The presentation is exquisite, murmurs a lady to your right, unaware that the decorative gelatin has been sitting unrefrigerated for 2 days, collecting ambient bacteria. Thank you, Duchess. We spare no expense for our guests, you reply, proudly consuming food that might send the entire table to bed with violent stomach ailments by morning. Medical care, pets with a purpose. As a wealthy person throughout history, you have access to the finest medical care money can buy. Unfortunately, the finest medical care throughout much of history was horrifying. If you're feeling unwell, your physician might suggest bloodletting, a practice that persisted from ancient times through the 19th century. As a person of means, you wouldn't use ordinary leeches. No, you'd have specially bred medicinal leeches, possibly kept in decorative containers, made of silver or gold. These vampire-like creatures would be applied to your skin to suck out bad blood. In the 1830s, Paris alone used up to 6 million leeches a year, and records from 1833 show that total French leech usage topped 100 million. How many leeches shall we apply today, Your Grace? Asks your physician. I'm feeling particularly bilious. Let's go with 20, you reply, rolling up your sleeve if leeches aren't your preference. Perhaps you'd prefer to be purposely infected with fleas. Some wealthy individuals in the 19th century were known to keep fleas as medical pets, believing they could draw out disease. Victorian ladies sometimes wore flea traps, small perforated containers filled with honey or blood to attract fleas away from their bodies. Or perhaps you'd prefer a more exotic treatment. If you're wealthy in the 16th century, your physician might prescribe mummy medicine. Yes, ground-up Egyptian mummies, consumed as a remedy for various ailments. King Francis I of France reportedly carried a mixture of mummy powder and rhubarb at all times to help him recover from injuries. Your Highness, your mummy powder with essence of unicorn horn, announces your apothecary, presenting a small vial of dark powder that is definitely not from a unicorn, and probably not even from a genuine Egyptian mummy your wealth would allow. You access to the most bizarre and expensive medical treatments throughout history. As a Roman patrician, you might consume gladiator blood as a cure for epilepsy. Medieval nobility might wear amulets containing dried toads to ward off plague, or drink gold flakes suspended in wine to strengthen the heart. If you lived during the 16th or 17th centuries, your physician would likely follow the Galenic theory of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, that needed to be kept in balance. This led to treatments designed to expel the excess humour, including violent purging through induced vomiting or diarrhea. Excellent progress, Your Lordship, exclaims your doctor as you empty the contents of your stomach into a silver basin. The antimony is drawing out the excess bile beautifully. The antimony he's referring to is actually a toxic metal that causes severe vomiting, a feature, not a bug, of this particular treatment. The fact that you might be losing vital fluids and electrolytes while gaining nothing but poisoning was beside the point. Royal physicians were particularly notorious for their deadly treatments. When King Charles II of England suffered a seizure in 1685, his 14 doctors administered treatments including bloodletting, blistering plasters, emetics, enemas, and a concoction made from the skull of a man who had died a violent death. They also forced a red-hot poker into his rectum. Unsurprisingly, The king died shortly thereafter. The royal posterior must be cauterized immediately, declares your chief physician, as you suddenly reconsider the benefits of being a common peasant without access to advanced medical care. If you're a wealthy woman in the 18th or 19th centuries, your treatment options were even more terrifying. Hysteria, cultural diagnosis for any female complaint, might be treated with pelvic massage or bastethia in extreme cases, surgical removal of the ovaries or clitoris. Pregnancy and childbirth, despite being natural processes, were increasingly medicalized. Among the upper classes, often with disastrous results, as doctors attended births with unwashed hands, spreading puerperal fever. Do not concern yourself, my lady. This new forceps delivery technique is all the rage among the aristocracy, assures your physician, neglecting to mention that he's just come from performing an autopsy without washing his hands. If you lived during the Victorian era, your medicine cabinet would be filled with patent remedies containing alcohol, opium, cocaine, and other addictive substances. Laudanum opium tincture was prescribed liberally for everything from coughs to depression. Wealthy women often became addicted, their dependency masked by the respectability of a doctor's prescription for respiratory complaints. You might use an asthma cigarette containing stramonium, a relative of deadly nightshade, or inhale the vapors from mercury heated over a flame. Teething infants in well-to-do families might be given Mrs. Winslow's soothing Syrupa concoction, containing morphine that certainly stopped the crying, sometimes permanently. Your evening tonic, madam, says your lady's maid, presenting a small bottle of brown liquid. The doctor has increased the dose to help with your nerves. Thank you, Mary. I don't know how I managed before Dr. Parker prescribed this wonderful medicine, you reply, unaware that your nerves are actually withdrawal symptoms from the opium you've been consuming daily for years. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of historical medical care for the wealthy was the concept of the royal touch, the belief that monarchs could cure certain diseases, particularly scrofula, a form of tuberculosis, by simply touching the afflicted. From the medieval period through the 18th century, kings and queens would hold elaborate ceremonies where hundreds of sick subjects would line up to be touched by the royal hand. King Charles II of England reportedly touched over 92,000 people during his reign. While this practice wasn't harmful in itself, it often prevented people from seeking other treatments and contributed to the mystical aura surrounding royalty, an aura that helped maintain the wealth disparities that defined pre-modern society. Next patient for His Majesty's healing touch calls the royal physician. As another scrofulous subject kneels before you, you reach out with your bejeweled hand to touch the subject's diseased neck, maintaining a benevolent expression while mentally calculating how soon you can wash this commoner's affliction from your royal fingers. Evening entertainment, socially acceptable. Squalor. Evening entertainment for the wealthy throughout history often involved displaying one's finest clothing, jewels, and manners. However, those fine manners would horrify modern sensibilities. If you're in a medieval royal court, spitting is perfectly acceptable. Just try to avoid spitting directly on the table. Spitting on the floor is preferred. Blowing your nose with your fingers is also fine, though etiquette books from the period advise against wiping your nose on the tablecloth when anyone's looking. Marvelous phlegm, your grace, remarks a courtier, attempting to curry favor through any means possible. In Elizabethan England, even Queen Elizabeth herself was known to spit frequently. Her godson, Sir John Harrington, wrote that she would spit round her when angry, forcing courtiers to be ready with handkerchiefs to catch the royal spittle. As evening progresses, the chamber pots begin to fill, and the already questionable air quality in your palace deteriorates further. Windows remain closed, particularly in winter, but often in summer too, as the night air was believed to cause illness. The concept of miasma, that disease spread through bad smells ironically, led people to seal themselves in with their own noxious odors. Ahem. As I was saying, Your Majesty, continues a courtier, pretending not to notice the royal flatulence that just silenced the room. If you're entertaining guests in the 17th or 18th centuries, your evening might include performances by musicians, dancers, or actors. These entertainers, despite their talent, were considered socially inferior and might be treated as little more than furniture. Stories abound of musicians being forced to play for hours without breaks, sometimes until their fingers bled, for the amusement of aristocratic audiences who paid little attention. No, no, continue playing, you command, noticing the musician's exhausted expression. We're not nearly tired enough for bed yet. The poor violinist resumes, his fingers cramping after 5 hours of continuous performance, while you and your guests continue your conversation without listening to a single note. Gaming was another popular evening pastime for the wealthy, with card games and dice offering opportunities to win or lose vast sums. Gambling addiction was rampant among the aristocracy, with some nobles losing entire estates in a single night. The gaming tables themselves would become disgusting as the night wore on, covered in spilled drinks, food, snuff, and occasionally vomit from overindulged players. Another 1,000 on the next roll. You declare, too intoxicated to notice that your fine silk sleeve is dragging through a puddle of spilled wine and someone else's tobacco spit. If you're a Georgian or Regency aristocrat in England, you might attend a fashionable ball where couples dance in close proximity despite their questionable hygiene. The heat generated by dozens of bodies in enclosed spaces, combined with the exertion of dancing and the multiple layers of rarely washed clothing, created a miasma of body odor that was considered normal. Ladies might faint from the combination of tight corseting and foul air, requiring smelling salts to revive them. Lady Pembroke has succumbed to the vapors again, notes your companion, as servants carry the unconscious woman to a settee. Unsurprising. She's wearing a new French perfume that's quite overwhelming, you reply, conveniently ignoring that the actual cause might be the accumulated body odor of 200 unwashed aristocrats performing vigorous country dances in an unventilated ballroom for truly decadent evening entertainment. You might attend or host a Roman-style orgy if you're a member of certain elite circles throughout history. These events, while sensationalized in modern media, did exist in various forms from ancient times through the 18th century's hellfire clubs. The combination of sexual activities, excessive drinking, and the general lack of hygiene would have made these gatherings particularly ripe environments for disease transmission. The Duke of Wharton's gathering promises to be quite educational this evening, whispers a fellow aristocrat with a meaningful look. Indeed. I've heard he's imported some fascinating antiquities from Pompeii for our appreciation. You reply, referring to the explicitly erotic artifacts that became fashionable collectibles among the 18th century elite. The theatre was another popular entertainment venue, though attendance was as much about being seen as seeing the performance. If you're a wealthy 17th or 18th century theatregoer, you might sit in a box where you could display your finery while chatting loudly during the show, throwing food at performers who displeased you, and occasionally relieving yourself in a corner. if visiting a proper facility seemed too inconvenient. Did you see Lady Winchester's new wig? Positively crawling with lice, you comment to your companion, completely ignoring the Shakespearean soliloquy being performed on stage. Yes, and I hear she's reduced to pawning her jewels to pay her gambling debts. Replies your friend, equally disinterested in the play you've ostensibly paid to see. If you're a Victorian elite, your evening entertainments might seem more refined on the surface, but they contained their own oddities. Spiritualism became fashionable in the mid-19th century, with séances attended by even the most respectable members of society, including Queen Victoria herself. These gatherings often featured charlatans using elaborate tricks to convince wealthy patrons they were communicating with the dead. The spirit of your departed husband is present, Lady Ashton intones the medium, skillfully manipulating the darkened room to hide the mechanisms creating the supernatural effects. Harold, is that you? You whisper tearfully, your rational faculties suspended by grief and the theatrical atmosphere. Your purse soon to be lightened by the convincing fraudster. Another popular Victorian pastime was viewing the bodies of the deceased. Wealthy families would display their dead relatives in the home for days before burial, with visitors coming to pay respects in rooms that quickly became thick with the smell of decay, partially masked by flowers and embalming chemicals. Post-mortem, photography posing with the deceased as if they were still alive was particularly fashionable, creating unsettling keepsakes that modern sensibilities find disturbing. Perhaps position the children on either side of their departed mother, suggests the photographer, arranging your family around the corpse as if for a conventional portrait. Excellent idea. And can we prop her up more naturally? She looks too dead, you request, apparently missing the fundamental reality of the situation. As your evening of entertainment winds down, you might retire to a bedroom that's warmer and better appointed than those of the lower classes, but still rife with its own hazards. The heavy bed curtains that demonstrate your wealth also trap heat, moisture, and insects, creating a microcosm of filth around your sleeping form. Chamber. Pots used throughout the night might not be emptied until morning, their contents adding to the room's distinctive bouquet. Shall I leave the warming pan in the bed a bit longer, your ladyship? Asks your night servant, referring to the metal pan filled with hot coals used to pre-warm the vast, cold expanses of your bed. Yes, and check for bed bugs while you're at it, you reply, knowing that despite your wealth, you share your sleeping quarters with a variety of uninvited guests. Historical beds themselves were often riddled with vermin, regardless of the owner's status. Henry VIII's beds were described in contemporary accounts as crawling with bugs and fleas. Despite being among the most luxurious sleeping arrangements in Tudor England, the king supposedly slept surrounded by furs not just for warmth and display, but as a barrier against small creatures and vermin. The evening's entertainment, whether public or private, formal or debauched, inevitably led to the same conclusion for historical elites, retiring to sleep in conditions that, while privileged by contemporary standards, would be considered intolerable by modern ones. Your wealth might buy you silk sheets, but it couldn't buy you freedom from the parasites that inhabited them. Is something troubling your sleep, my lord? Inquires your night servant, noticing your discomfort. Nothing unusual. You mutter, scratching absently at the lice bites on your neck. Just the normal nocturnal companions. As the candles are extinguished and darkness envelops your bedchamber, you drift off to sleep, surrounded by the accumulated filth of your privileged existence. The lead-based cosmetics still clinging to your face, the unwashed body beneath your nightclothes, the parasites nesting in your bedding, and the distinctive aromas of a pre-modern life that no amount of wealth could sanitize. Your day of elite living draws to a close, only to begin again. Tomorrow, with the same routines of privileged squalor, a cycle of filth that wealth amplified rather than alleviated, creating new categories of disgustingness, available only to those who could afford them: medicine and mortality. Wealth is no protection. As dawn breaks on another day of your privileged existence, you awaken with a terrible toothache and affliction that spares neither peasant nor king. But fear not. Your wealth grants you access to the finest dental practitioners of your era, which is, unfortunately, still horrifying. If you're an elite in Tudor England suffering from dental pain, your royal physician might recommend a mouthwash of boiled urine, preferably a young boy's mixed with wine. When that inevitably fails to resolve the issue, extraction becomes necessary. Without effective anesthetics, you will be held down while the barber surgeon yanks out the offending tooth with crude metal instruments, likely breaking your jaw in the process. Hold still, Your Grace. Just one more pull, encourages your barber surgeon, his sleeve already splattered with your blue-blooded spittle. Meg, is your eloquent reply as several attendants pin your thrashing limbs. For the wealthiest patients, tooth replacements might be fashioned from extracted teeth, purchased from the poor who sold them for desperately needed cash, or taken from battlefield corpses. These Waterloo teeth, named after the practice of harvesting teeth from dead soldiers after the Battle of Waterloo, were prized for their quality and youth. Your new dentures might literally be wearing a dead peasant's smile. These are excellent specimens, Your Highness, says your dental practitioner, displaying a collection of teeth pried from the mouths of dead soldiers. Young, strong men with excellent enamel. Will have your smile restored by next week. Wonderful. You mumble through swollen lips. Ensure they're properly cleaned. I don't want to catch the commoner's consumption. What your practitioner doesn't mention is that his cleaning process involves merely wiping the teeth with a cloth, perhaps giving them a quick rinse in vinegar. The concept of sterilization won't be developed for centuries. If dental issues aren't your concern, perhaps you're suffering from another common aristocratic ailment, gout. This painful inflammation of the joints was so common among the wealthy that it became known as the disease of kings, or rich man's disease, caused by a diet excessively rich in meat, alcohol, and sugar luxuries only the wealthy could afford. In quantity, gout was almost a status symbol, proof that you could afford to eat yourself into agony. More port, your lordship, inquires your butler, even as you wince from the pain in your swollen foot. Of course, you reply, reaching for the decanter with a bejeweled, gout-twisted hand. The physician recommends I drink through the pain. In reality, your physician has recommended no such thing, but medical advice throughout history was often conveniently interpreted to align with patients' desires. If you're a wealthy patient in most historical periods, your doctors might be reluctant to contradict you, or prescribe unpleasant treatments for fear of losing your patronage. This dynamic led to bizarre medical regimens tailored to aristocratic sensibilities, rather than suggesting diet and lifestyle changes to address gout. Physicians might prescribe exotic treatments like pulverized pearls, gold leaf dissolved in wine, or herbal concoctions containing dozens of rare ingredients. Expensive, all-impressive, and all utterly ineffective. This remedy contains powdered emerald, unicorn horn, and the dried liver of a white peacock, explains your physician, preparing a useless but extremely costly medicine. Only the finest ingredients for your excellency's condition, as it should be, you agree, unaware that the unicorn horn is actually narwhal tusk, and the rest is equally questionable. The wealthy throughout history also had unique relationships with pregnancy and childbirth. If you're a noble lady expecting a child, you might retreat to a lying-in chamber weeks before your due date. This room would be sealed against fresh air, with windows covered and heavy tapestries hung to prevent any drafts based on the mistaken belief that air caused illness. By the time you gave birth, the chamber would be a stifling, fetid environment, perfect for breeding the bacteria that caused puerperal fever, a major killer of postpartum women. The room must remain sealed, my lady, insists your midwife as you gasp for breath in the overheated chamber. The night air would be fatal to you and the child. Meanwhile, the peasant woman giving birth in a relatively well-ventilated cottage might actually have better odds of survival despite her lower social status and lack of medical attention. If you're a male aristocrat concerned with fertility, historical physicians might recommend a codpiece filled with herbs, goat testicles, consumed at every meal, or wearing amulets made from the reproductive organs of various animals. Female nobles trying to conceive might be advised to consume powdered stag penis or to insert mixtures of honey and crocodile dung as a contraceptive which, unsurprisingly, didn't work and often caused infections. This amulet contains the dried reproductive organs of a hare, your grace, explains your physician. Wear it against your skin at all times to ensure potency and male heirs. Excellent. And what of that potion you mentioned? You inquire, desperate to produce the heir your dynasty requires. Ah, yes. A tincture of mandrake root, Spanish fly, and powdered rhinoceros horn. Guaranteed to increase virility, he assures you, neglecting to mention that Spanish fly cantharides is a dangerous poison that causes urinary tract inflammation, which was misinterpreted as sexual stimulation when it was actually just painful. Swelling. Despite perhaps because of their access to the most expensive treatments. The wealthy often suffered from iatrogenic illnesses, those caused by medical treatment itself. King Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg monarch of Spain, was the product of generations of inbreeding among European royalty, resulting in severe physical and mental disabilities. His physicians subjected him to treatments, including applying heated pigeons to his head, forcing him to drink gold dissolved in water, and regular enemas with milk, alcohol, and herbal concoctions. He died at 38, having endured a lifetime of well-intentioned medical torture. Hold the pigeon firmly against His Majesty's head until it expires, instructs the royal physician. The heat will draw out the evil humours causing his seizures. The king whimpers but cannot protest his grotesquely elongated Habsburg jaw. Another gift from his inbred ancestry makes speech difficult. His attendants look on sympathetically but dare not interfere with medical experts. The paradox of privilege, suffering in silk as the day progresses. You might begin to notice a paradoxical truth about historical wealth in many ways. Your exalted status makes you more vulnerable to certain hazards than the peasants you look down upon. This is particularly evident in the realm of fashion, where the wealthy deliberately embraced impractical and often harmful clothing to display their freedom from manual labor. If you're a wealthy woman in the 16th through 19th centuries, you're likely cinched into a corset so tight that your internal organs are displaced, causing digestive problems, breathing difficulties, and even skeletal deformities over time. The practice of tight lacing became increasingly extreme in the Victorian era, with some fashionable women reducing their waists to an impossible 16 inches through constant compression. Tighter, made. I must be presentable for the duchesses. Ball tonight, you command, between laboured breaths. But my lady, you fainted at the last gathering. Your maid protests weakly. Fashion requires sacrifice, you insist, gripping the bedpost as the corset constricts your ribcage further. The wealthy of both sexes wore clothing made with dyes that contained arsenic, mercury, and other toxins. Shields, greener vibrant. Arsenic-based dye was particularly popular for Victorian dresses. Wallpapers and artificial flowers, despite causing illness in those who manufactured or wore these items. The dye combined copper and arsenic, leading to skin irritation, ulceration, and even cancer with prolonged exposure. Men weren't exempt from dangerous fashion. Tudor and Elizabethan gentlemen wore padded codpieces that, while created warm, moist environments perfect for fungal infections. Georgian men squeezed into tight breeches and waistcoats that restricted movement, while their elaborately styled wigs harbored lice and emitted foul odors from the pomade used to shape them. Your Excellency, shall I apply more powder to your wig? Asks your valet, noticing you scratching at the lice bites. Yes, and more pomade, too. I hear the Prince Regent will be attending tonight's function, you reply, prioritizing appearance over comfort or hygiene. The powder he applies contains lead, and the pomade is made from beef fat that will turn rancid in the heat of a crowded ballroom. By the end of the evening, your fashionable wig will be not just a style statement, but a toxic, putrid health hazard perched atop your noble head. Children of wealthy families suffered particularly under the demands of fashion and etiquette. From the Renaissance through the Victorian era, elite children were often dressed in miniature versions of adult clothing, including corsets for girls as young as 3. Boys might be tightly bound into restrictive formal wear that prevented natural movement and play. These physical constraints were matched by behavioral expectations that required unnatural stillness and formality from young bodies designed to run and explore. Stand straight, Lord Henry. A gentleman does not slouch, scolds the tutor, forcing a 7-year-old boy into a rigid posture that will eventually damage his developing spine. But it hurts, whispers the child, already learning that nobility comes with physical suffering. Pain is temporary. Breeding is permanent, replies the tutor, delivering a lesson that encapsulates the aristocratic approach to the human body as something to be molded, constrained and controlled, regardless of the cost to health or comfort. Your wealthy status also exposed you to environmental toxins that the poor might avoid. The elaborate wallpapers in your mansion likely contained arsenic, as did the artificial flowers decorating your hats and home. The lead pipes bringing water to your exclusive indoor bathroom leached poison into every drop you drank. The cosmetics on your dressing table contained mercury, lead, and arsenic. Even your fancy green-dyed clothing released toxic substances that were absorbed through your skin. The new dining room is magnificent, you tell your decorator, running your hand along the vibrant green wallpaper. Such a lively colour. Only the finest Shields green for your ladyship, replies the decorator, not mentioning that the arsenic-laden paper will slowly poison everyone who dines in the room, especially in damp weather when the toxic compounds become airborne. The irony of historical wealth, as your day as a historical elite comes to an end. You might reflect on the strange irony of your situation. Your wealth has purchased you rare foods that contribute to gout and digestive ailments. Your status demands clothing that deforms your body and exposes you to toxins. Your fine home is filled with beautiful objects that slowly poison you, and your access to the most expensive medical care subjects you to the most elaborate and dangerous treatments. Meanwhile, the peasant farming in the field might eat a simpler but more nutritionally balanced diet of grains, vegetables, and occasional meat. Their homespun clothing, while rough, allows for movement and breathes better than your tightly laced finery. Their humble cottage, with its dirt floor and thatched roof, lacks the toxic wallpapers and lead pipes of your mansion. And when sick, they might rely on traditional herbal remedies that, while not always effective, are less likely to kill them than the exotic concoctions prescribed for you. This isn't to romanticize poverty. The poor throughout history suffered terribly from malnutrition, overwork, exposure, and lack of care. But wealth created its own unique categories of suffering, its own specialized forms of filth and disease. The ultimate irony is that many of the disgusting habits of the historical rich were direct results of their attempts to separate themselves from the dirty lower classes. Elaborate cosmetics, perfumes, and wigs were meant to demonstrate refinement, but often created health hazards unknown to those who couldn't afford such luxuries. Your Highness should rest, suggests your physician. Listening to your arsenic-damaged lungs. Nonsense. I have a ball to attend, you insist, reaching for the makeup to cover your palaruna wear, that the cosmetics will only worsen your condition. Sleep and superstition, nocturnal nonsense. As night falls again, your body's servant prepares you for sleep, a process that, like everything else in your privileged life, is more elaborate and often less hygienic than that of your social inferiors. If you're a medieval or Renaissance noble, you might sleep in a massive bed shared with several family members, attendants, or guests. The concept of bedroom privacy is centuries away. King Louis XIV of France turned his morning rising and evening retiring into elaborate court ceremonies, with favored nobles competing for the honor of helping the king dress and undress. Is the warming pan sufficiently heated? You ask, as a servant slides a metal pan filled with hot coals between your sheets to take the chill off the vast, cold bed. Yes, your grace, and I've checked for bedbugs, though there are still a few I couldn't catch, admits the servant. No matter. The new pomade should keep them at bay, you reply, referring to the toxic mercury-laden cream applied to your body to deter insects. A treatment that slowly poisons you as you sleep. Your bedtime routine might include numerous superstitious practices to ward off nightmares and illness. Medieval nobles often slept with their arms outside the caberza, practice believed to prevent nocturnal emissions and demonstrate moral character even while unconscious. Pillows were sometimes filled with dried hops or lavender to promote sleep, but might also contain less pleasant ingredients like dried toads or bat wings, believed to prevent night terrors. I've prepared your lordship's special pillow with the dried heart of a fox, as recommended for preventing evil dreams, explains your night servant, plumping a pillow stuffed with materials that range from fragrant to foul. Excellent. And the protective amulet? You inquire, taking your superstitions very seriously despite your supposed education and status. Placed beneath the mattress, as always, sir, the saint's finger bones, the dried mandrake root, and the pouch of graveyard dirtle, exactly as you prefer. This blend of Christianity, paganism, and folk medicine characterized the spiritual lives of even the most outwardly pious nobles. While publicly adhering to official religious doctrines, In private, many aristocrats hedged their bets with older, more primal protective magic. Sleeping arrangements for the wealthy were not just about rest, but about display. Your enormous bed, with its elaborate hangings and embroidered linens, might be one of the most expensive items you own, often listed specifically in wills and passed down through generations. Yet despite this luxury, you might sleep semi-upright, propped on multiple pillows, a practice believed to prevent the night air from entering the body and causing illness. "Is this position adequate, Your Majesty?" asks your night attendant, arranging pillows to keep you at a 45-degree angle. "I suppose it must be," you sigh, preparing for another night of interrupted sleep, convinced that lying flat would invite death to claim you before morning. This belief that sleeping fully reclined was dangerous persisted well into the 19th century, particularly among those wealthy enough to indulge their health anxieties. Combined with heavy night garments, multiple occupants in the bed, parasitic infestations, and the effects of lead, mercury, and arsenic accumulated in your body from your cosmetics and medications, a good night's sleep was often elusive despite your feather mattress and fine linens, the great equalizer. And so, dear viewer, as our bedtime story comes to an end, we find ourselves reflecting on this peculiar historical truth, that wealth and power, for all their advantages, did not necessarily translate to cleanliness or health. In many cases, the practices of the elite were more harmful than those of the common people, who couldn't afford exotic poisons or elaborate cosmetics. The peasant who bathed in a river, when the opportunity presented itself, might have been cleaner than the noble who avoided water but doused themselves in perfume. The servant who ate simple foods might have been healthier than the lord who consumed exotic, spiced meats, often on the verge of spoilage. In our modern world of indoor plumbing, antibacterial soap, and basic understanding of germ theory, perhaps we are all richer than Louis XIV ever was. After all, what good is a golden chamber pot when what you really need is a flush toilet? Throughout history, wealth created its own peculiar afflictions: gout from rich foods, skin poisoning from toxic cosmetics, deformities from fashionable clothing, and iatrogenic illnesses from expensive but misguided medical treatments. The very symbols of status and power, elaborate wigs, white lead makeup, arsenic-laced wallpaper, mercury medicines, often contributed directly to suffering and early death. This is perhaps the most profound irony of historical wealth, that in attempting to separate themselves from the filthy common people, the elite often created more sophisticated forms of filth, more elaborate varieties of self-harm disguised as luxury and refinement. The historical wealthy lived in a world where appearances mattered more than reality, where seeming clean was more important than being clean, where looking healthy took precedence over actual health, and where the trappings of status were worth any physical cost. Consider Queen Elizabeth I, who maintained a dazzling public image while slowly poisoning herself with lead cosmetics, or King Louis XIV, who ruled as the glorious Sun King while refusing to bathe and holding court from his close stool, or Victorian socialites who achieved fashionable pallor by literally consuming poison. These weren't merely individual eccentricities, but systematic cultural practices embraced by entire social classes, practices that now seem not just disgusting, but tragically absurd in their prioritization of status over well-being. Perhaps there's a lesson here for our own time, as we consider what modern luxuries and status symbols might be viewed with similar horror by future generations. What contemporary practices might someday appear in a video titled "Gross Habits of Rich People in the 2020s." As you drift off to sleep tonight in your clean bed, in your well-ventilated room, with your body free from lead makeup and arsenic. Wafers, consider yourself truly wealthy in ways that even the Sun King himself could never imagine. Your hot shower, your toothpaste, your refrigerated food, and your science-based medicine are luxuries beyond anything available to historical elites. Like and subscribe if your skincare routine includes fewer deadly toxins than a 17th century duchess. Comment below with which disgusting historical period you'd least like to visit. And hit that notification bell if you want more delightfully revolting history tales to ruin your appetite. Sweet dreams. And be thankful that your bed is only full of monsters, not literal parasites, feasting on your blood as you sleep. Final reflections. The ultimate historical luxury. In the end, perhaps the most striking conclusion we can draw from examining the gross habits of historical elites is that true cleanliness may have been the one luxury that wealth couldn't reliably buy until relatively recent times. Monarchs with the power to wage wars and command armies couldn't command effective sanitation or safe medical care. Aristocrats who could purchase paintings by master artists and jewels from exotic lands couldn't purchase knowledge that didn't yet exist, knowledge about germs, toxicology, and basic human physiology. There's something profoundly humbling in recognizing that even the mightiest historical figures, kings, queens, emperors, and popes, were vulnerable to forces they couldn't see or understand. Their gold and jewels couldn't protect them from bacteria. Their titles and lands couldn't shield them from the effects of lead and mercury. Their armies couldn't fight off the parasites living in their wigs and bedding. In this way, filth was perhaps history's great equalizer, though the wealthy might have gilded chamber pots while the poor used ditches. Both were equally vulnerable to the diseases spread by improper waste disposal, though nobles might cover themselves in expensive perfumes while peasants smelled of honest sweat. Both carried the same human bacteria. Though royalty might afford exotic medical treatments involving gold and gemstones, these were often no more effective, and sometimes less so, than the herbal remedies used by village healers. This isn't to suggest that wealth conferred no advantages. It certainly did, particularly in terms of nutrition, shelter, and protection from certain environmental hazards. But in the specific realm of hygiene and its related health impacts, the correlation between wealth and cleanliness was complex and often inverted, with status signaling behaviors frequently increasing rather than decreasing exposure to filth and toxins. So the next time you find yourself envying the glamorous lives of historical elites as portrayed in films and television, remember the reality behind the fantasy: the lice-ridden wigs, the lead-painted faces, the urine mouthwash, the arsenic, wafers, the shared bathwater, the toxic wallpaper, the chamber pots emptied from windows, the unwashed bodies beneath silk and velvet, and the parasites waiting in canopied beds. Your modern life, with its indoor plumbing, refrigeration, waste management, and evidence-based medicine, offers comforts and protections that even Emperor Augustus or Queen Elizabeth I couldn't imagine. In the most meaningful ways, you live more luxuriously than any king or queen who reigned before the 20th century. Like and subscribe if you appreciate modern sanitation. Drop a comment telling us which historical gross habit surprised you most. And remember, being wealthy in the past wasn't just about having more stuff. It was about having more elaborate ways to be disgusting. Sweet dreams, and may your modern medicines contain significantly less powdered mummy than those of your ancestors.